pleased to have with us candidates Gara and Walker. You'll note that there's not a third, and I figure I should say something about that. All of those three candidates were invited. We really appreciate Les and Bill's acceptance. I know that Governor Dunleavy had wanted to be here. He was otherwise scheduled during this time and couldn't attend. He's been in touch with our office, and we're working on a follow-up discussion that he can have with AML members. So I know that's out there, and I just wanted to flag that for you for right now. But it's awesome to be in this election cycle again, to be thinking about the future and where we're headed. And there's a lot between now and next November. And some of the faces, well, I think all the faces on the stage will be familiar to you. Bryce is new, but he's not running for governor yet. So we've got some great conversation ahead of us, and I'll turn things over to Mayor Ward to facilitate that conversation. Thanks, Bryce.
All right, thanks, Nils, and thank you to our candidates for being here today. We've got a list of questions, and we were able to provide that to our candidates ahead of time. We do have a short script we're going to try to keep things on. We do have Mr. Jacob Lincoln here by the screen in front of us that's going to try to keep us on time. We've got a few minutes scheduled for these questions. This is a get to know the candidates forum, so think about it that way. It's not necessarily a debate, but we want to get a chance to know more about Mr. Walker and Mr. Gara. So with that being said, we've got a few kind of easy questions to get started off with. We do have a few questions we're going to go through that are yes and no questions, and so candidates, please take a look. You've got a yes and no placard. Get yourself acquainted with those, and we've got a couple of easy questions in there too, some hardballs as well. So we'll start off, we'll kind of go back and forth. We'll start off with Mr. Candidate Gara. We'll go to Mr. Walker and go then Mr. Walker and then Candidate Gara as well. So we'll get started, and thanks everyone for being here. So Candidate Gara, would you please tell us who you are? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Can folks hear me? I'm not so good at talking sitting down. My name is Les Gara. I've lived in Alaska since 1988. Just so you know who I am, I grew up in New York City. My father was an immigrant. He went straight into the Korean War. When I was 6, somebody broke into his office late at night and killed him. I later found out with a knife, and it was pretty awful. And so I ended up growing up in foster care, starting at age 6 until 18. I worked my way not just through college, but through grade school. And I'll say that's my hardship. Everybody in this room has had their own hardship, and I think that's what I've learned about people as I've grown up. Ended up working my way through grade school, through college, through law school, where apparently Michelle Obama was there too, but she never said hi to me, so I don't know her. I did graduate with honors. I'm proud of that, but so did she. We both didn't have the background that should have sent us to law school, right? And my belief is that everybody deserves an opportunity to succeed in this world. And I learned that from my childhood. She learned that from her childhood. And you've all learned that, I bet, from the hardship you've grown up with. I've been married to my wife, Kelly, for 31 years. Kelly's a hospital worker in town. I'm proud of what she's done during this crisis. She has all of my love and all of my respect. We moved to Fairbanks in 1988, where I worked with Justice Jay Rabinowitz at the Supreme Court. Then the Exxon Valdez oil spill happened, and I called the state and I said, are you going to do anything about the nation's largest catastrophic oil spill in our history? And they said yes, and they said, if you want a job with us, you have to move to Anchorage. So that's how I ended up here, and Kelly now works at the hospital here, and I worked as an assistant attorney general on the civil prosecution of Exxon. And then I've been a legislator for 16 years, and my belief is opportunity for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Gara. Candidate Walker, would you please tell us who you are?
Well, it's great to be back. Great to be back in front of AML. It's kind of like coming home for me. I can't remember a time I've missed an AML event, whether it's in Healy or wherever it is around the state, because it's made up of people that are doers, that are leaders in the local government. I've often said that the purest form of government is local government, because you're closer to the people, you're closer to the needs. So thank each and every one of you for your particular role in local government. My background, my father was in the Alaskan Scouts in World War II. He attended UAF after that in their School of Mines. My mother came to Alaska, Frances Walker, to work on the building of the Alcan Highway. And so that was the background. They met in Fairbanks, and I was born in Fairbanks. Moved to, after a few years in Fairbanks, spent about 5 years in Delta Junction. Continuing the southern movement, we moved to Valdez in about 1960, and got there. My dad was a house builder, so I grew up pounding nails and doing construction for him. It was a small crew, my dad, my brother, and myself. Earthquake came along in '64. We were put out of business. You couldn't build anything in a town that was going to move. So my dad said, we're now going to move houses. I remember saying, I was 12. I said, well, Dad, we don't know how to move houses. And he said, you're right. But after that first one, we'll know a lot more. And we did. So we were in the house moving business. No one got hurt. We didn't drop a house. We moved a bunch of houses. Went off to graduate from high school in Valdez and went off to college and came back. Ultimately went on to law school, but I came back to Valdez and met a wonderful who became my bride, Donna Pyle. She was the first Parks and Recreation director for the city of Valdez. She was 21, and she had worked on the pipeline construction, as did I. We went off to, after I served on the city council, I got involved in the Transportation Commission first, city council when I was about 25, and when I was 27, I was the mayor of Valdez and resigned as mayor and went on to onto law school from there, came back to Valdez, and I, about 30 years as a municipal attorney, representing various municipalities around the state, largely Valdez, and so ran for governor in 2010, 2014, and very happy to have served as a governor of this great state. We have, Donna and I
We
have
are a time candidate,
4 children
Walker.
and 6 grandchildren. I'm not going to leave out the children and grandchildren. I'll finish on that.
All right.
So, thank you. Thank you.
Very important, thank you. And if you do hear the phone in the front, that is our candidate timer. So thank you for paying attention to that. All right, we'll then go back to candidate, we'll go back and forth. Candidate Walker, we'll start on this time. We'll come back to candidate Walker, candidate Gara. Candidate Walker, why are you running for governor?
You know, I'm running for governor because I'm not a very good bystander when there's something that needs to be done. I'm just not, never have been. I look at what is not happening in Alaska. I look at the gridlock we're in. We were able to resolve, by working with the legislature, 3/4 of the deficit. We brought it from $4 billion down to $1 billion. I saw what happened when you work across party lines. As an independent, there are no party lines. So it's a matter of working as Alaskans, like you do in local government, and I really mean that. We have some issues we need to resolve, but what incredible opportunities we had ahead of us. Absolutely, I call it the pent-up opportunities of Alaska. And I know you heard from Senator Murkowski today on the wonderful, incredible infrastructure bill that's going to change the face of this state. So we have some tremendous opportunities ahead for us. We just got to get over these last hurdles. We are arguing over what we don't have and crawling over all that we do have. So it's a matter of getting back to being Alaskans again, stop the partisan battles that are going on, and move on, resolve these issues, and that's what it needs, is leadership to do that. We did that once, we'll do that again.
Thank you, candidate Walker. Candidate Gara.
Thank you. I believe in a better future. A future that is an Alaska we can believe in again. Right now, we're living in a state where people are leaving. Last year, 9,000 people left the state because they don't see a future. They don't see support for our public schools, which are $120 million behind inflation since 2014. That's not a future. Right now, they see that we've left 6,000 jobs on the sidelines. If we had our normal construction budget, we'd have 6,000 people back to work in good paying jobs across Alaska, building renewable energy in rural Alaska, fixing our roads, our bridges, our ports. We could do all that and start whittling away at a $2 billion deferred maintenance list that's calling for people to work. And this governor has said, I'm going to leave 6,000 people out of work. We're going to continue the recession, and we're not going to do anything about it. That's why I'm running. I'm running because you deserve a future with jobs and better schools and opportunities so everybody can succeed in this world. Nobody in this race has a stronger record on public education than I do. My whole career as a legislator, I said school funding should go up with inflation every single year so we don't end up where we are today. Losing teachers, telling teachers they get 0% pay increases, and telling communities they have to spread the bad news to our educators and our police and our firefighters and our public employees. I've fought for statewide pre-K my whole life because that helps youth enter school ready to read and ready to learn, and youth who go through pre-K earn more money when they graduate, end up in jail less, save us money, and get more opportunity in their lives. These aren't new issues for me. For every candidate in this race, that will be a new issue if they come on board. But statewide pre-K has been my issue since I've been in the legislature. Keeping school funding up with inflation has been my issue since I've been in the legislature. And I have said in voting against the end of pensions for teachers and firefighters and public employees that we should not end those, and I have fought to return those. And I'm the only candidate in this race who has fought to return those in elected office too. I'd appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Gara. Candidate Gara, you'll start us off on this question. What is your vision for Alaska?
My vision for Alaska is to have
Candidate Walker, I'm sorry. Candidate Gara, I'm sorry. We're going back and forth. I apologize.
And so my vision for Heidi Douglas.
I got confused the first time. Again, my vision for Alaska is I want this to be a place people believe in again, that people want to stay in, not move away from. But right now we're in a state that people are thinking about moving. You know neighbors who are thinking about moving. You know family members who are thinking about moving. Because we don't provide the jobs that we need to provide, and we don't provide the education that we should provide, and we don't provide a commitment that people can rely on for public education. There is no business that's going to move up to Alaska when they don't see us have our fiscal house in order, and when they know that they're moving up to a state with no commitment to public education, no commitment to university that provides voc ed, by the way, and that's left 6,000 jobs to the side. That's not a recipe for bringing business up here. It shouldn't be controversial. Climate change is real. But you can believe in it and create jobs and reduce energy costs at the same time. Climate change means that we bring renewable energy across the state like they've done in Kodiak. And then we put people to work building renewable energy across the state. And then we look at communities like Igiagig, which has in-river power. Alaska can bring renewable energy to the state because rural Alaska power costs are so high that renewable energy, even new experimental renewable energy, reduces the cost of power. We should be upgrading our diesel plants so they're more efficient because the cleanest energy is the energy you don't burn. And I'm proud that I authored the legislation in this state with Bill Thomas from Haines across party lines to require that all state buildings, all schools be built to cost-saving energy efficiency standards. So we use less fuel, so we save communities money, and so we also do our part in addressing this problem of global warming. We can do it from this state as well. I want businesses up here, and part of the way you do that is to say we don't give away $1 billion in subsidies to our oil industry when we can't afford a public education. We don't have to pit people who want a PFD against people who want public education, against people who want to respect our elders, against people who want to support our children. We can do all those things, but you can't do it without revenue. And you can't do it with a law that gives away $1 billion of tax subsidies to companies and oil tax credits that they get even if they don't invest a penny of those funds in Alaska. You get those oil tax credits under the current law. If you take every single penny you get and you bring it to Oklahoma, you still get the same amount. It's an insane way to do fiscal policy, and it's bankrupting the state. And you're not going to get people to say, I'm going to come to the table to chip in if they think that their money is going to go to subsidize the oil industry. So I think we have to stand up. Unlike Governor Dunleavy, I voted against those subsidies in 2013. He voted for them, and it's one of the reasons we're in the state we are right now, because he doesn't have the guts to stand up to the oil industry, and I do. I have the guts to say we should be equal partners with an industry that produces good jobs, but that we shouldn't be junior partners. And today we're junior partners, and it's costing us education, and it's harming us across the state. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Gara. And I'll make an executive decision that we're just going to go back and forth, and I won't try to do the goofy thing. So we'll go to candidate Walker next, and then we'll come back to candidate Gara. So candidate Walker, would you please share your vision for Alaska?
And my apologies to Representative Gara for jumping in his time there. Well, my vision for Alaska, as I said before, I'd love to see, we're going to see Heidi Dragas as the next lieutenant governor. Those that have not met her, you're in for a treat. Those that have met her, I can tell when they've met her because their reaction is very, very positive. She's a phenomenal, she was a phenomenal Alaskan, phenomenal commissioner of labor. It's about jobs in Alaska, and she will be very aggressive about that. I want an Alaska where we have universal pre-K. I want an Alaska where we have, the teachers have a retirement system that means that they will stay in Alaska and not just be here for 4 or 5 years and move on to someplace else. You know, longevity in the teaching profession is very, very important. I want an Alaska that has the cheapest energy in the nation, not the most expensive energy in the nation. I want an Alaskan that is the center of the universe of climate change research and technology. It should be in the university system. You know, we put together a 25-member climate change action committee, and they put out a 40-page report, which we're going to put on our website. It was taken down soon after we came into office because they were dismissed. We will stand them up again and bring back that group. It was everybody from a whaling captain in the Arctic as well as the president of BP Alaska. We had 25 Alaskans that put together a tremendous amount of work on climate change. We need to take it seriously. I want to see an Alaska where the young people, when they get out of school, they don't go off to jobs in the lower 48. They're able to stay here through a career in technical education, through fisheries development. I want to see in Alaska that we're the lead in mariculture. We have 30,000 miles of ocean around us. The blue economy is real. It absolutely is real. I want to see that develop. We need to recognize the reality we're living in. You know, the hydrocarbon industry is moving away. As far as not moving away from Alaska, it is in some respects. We're moving beyond that into the next realm. You know, I quote Wayne Gretzky often. He did well in hockey because he anticipated where the puck was going to be. We need to anticipate where we're going to be in 50 years and make sure we have our young people trained for that opportunity. I want to see in Alaska that when the hundreds of planes that come to Ted Stevens International every day full of packages, when they leave, they're full of things that are made and grown in Alaska, whether it's caught in the ocean, where it's manufactured. You know, we ship out all of our raw materials, and along with that goes jobs. We should be manufacturing a product and then shipping the product out so that we have the jobs in the state. We're losing population. We're losing hope in the state. I want a state where the young people say, I'm absolutely going to stay here. I'm going to get my education here. I'm going to stay here. You know, and I want an Alaska that we aren't fighting over the permanent fund dividend, that we know what it is. It's the highest dividend we can possibly pay, and it grows. I want to see an Alaska that has a $100 billion permanent fund. We're at 81. We're about 75 to 81. We get $100 billion, we're good. We're really good. We need to get there. We have the 14th largest permanent fund in the world, the highest per capita probably in the world. We need to grow the permanent fund for the benefit of all of Alaskans.
Thank you, candidate Walker. Candidate Gara, what are the top 3 priorities for your administration, and what is your plan to tackle those issues?
We need to do the thing Governor Dunleavy promised 3 years ago, come up with a fiscal plan, something he forgot the day after he took office. He's proposed the spending part of the PFD, but not how to fund it. It's been a false promise this whole time. Everything is a false promise if you can't pay for it. It's what a 1970s liberal got accused of, right? You propose the spending part, but you don't propose the how to pay for it part, and it's fake. So first, we do a fiscal plan. And I've talked about giving away $1 billion to the oil industry when we don't have enough money for our schools or our seniors or to have a basic construction budget to put people to work across the state and rural and urban Alaska, so that we can have good schools where students and parents aren't begging just to stay up with the cost of inflation, seeing their teachers get underpaid, seeing their schools get emptier and emptier and emptier of instructors and educators. I believe in a real construction budget to put people back to work. We don't have to be in a recession. We've kept ourselves in a recession by not putting people to work. In our ports that need repair, our airstrips that need repair, $2 billion of growing infrastructure on the states and universities' deferred maintenance lists that are being neglected. And those projects are growing, roofs that are leaking at the university. And I also believe that fish bind Alaskans. Whether you're a sport fisherman, subsistence fisher, commercial fisher, we need to protect our fish runs. We saw the catastrophe in western Alaska. That's a warning sign. It's a warning sign we're not doing things right. It's a warning sign we need to have valid research and use local knowledge to help us deal with reversing the loss of chums and the loss of pinks and the loss of kings in so many parts of our state. And I think I'm going to say something that most people don't say. I think 20 years of outside factory trawlers that drag the bottom of our ocean every single day during the summer, drag the bottom of our ocean, that's got to have a consequence. You can't ask yourself what's happened to our crab or halibut or salmon and not say, wait a second, is that not part of it? I don't have the answer on that, but I do believe that we have to, at the North Pacific Marine Fisheries Council, appoint people who will do what's needed to protect our fisheries. And if that means rejiggering what we do on regulations for outside factory bottom trawlers, we do that. And if there's anybody that can tell me that dragging the bottom of the ocean for 20 years outside the 3-mile limit is good for our Alaska fish when we don't have chums coming back to Nome, and we don't have kings coming back to the Yukon River, and we don't have fish coming back across the state, I think you're missing one of the obvious problems, and that's bycatch by factory trawlers on the high seas, and we should do something about it, not just talk about it.
Thank you, Candidate Gara. Candidate Walker, what are your top 3 priorities for your administration and the plan to tackle those issues?
Number one is the pandemic. We need to get past the pandemic. We need to do what we need to, everything possible to make sure we get past it. And by that I mean, you know, a lot of people ask me, would I mandate this, would I mandate that? I would mandate leadership. I would mandate leadership. We don't have leadership on that issue now. We have it from the medical community. We have it from the administration, the Department of Health and Social Services, Dr. Zink, but we don't have it from the governor. We need a governor that will mandate leadership on that issue and take a strong stand. I've watched other governors, Governor Baker in Massachusetts, Governor Larry Hogan in Maryland, both Republican governors, aggressively advocating for vaccination. So I think that's part that's missing in it moving beyond. We know that the vaccination, and I know when I'm talking to, you know, when I take a position, other people might be opposed to that, and I'm fine with that. You just need to know where I'm coming from. We need to get the vaccination numbers higher so we can move on beyond this before there's another variant that comes in. And God bless the medical health workers. And Representative Gara's wife is one as well. So thank Kelly for what she has done. And we owe them an incredible debt of gratitude for what they're dealing with. Unbelievable what they have been faced with. I've had calls with the chairman of the Hospital Association. They tell me about the terrible, what they're witnessing as far as backlogs and getting into medical facilities. It's absolutely stunning. Leadership. We absolutely need leadership in this state. You just need to show up. You need to show up and do the job. We will bring that back. We had leadership. We need a fiscal plan. We put together a fiscal plan. Maybe it's my building background. I don't do anything without a plan. I got to know what we're building, what we're trying to do. So we put together a very comprehensive fiscal plan, and we presented it to the legislature. We had everything on there you can imagine. It was a buffet of options of what to do. And now I'm told by legislators we're ready for a fiscal plan. Bring a fiscal plan. I believe that's the role of the governor, is to step up and help lay out the plan, not sit back and hope the legislature finds a solution to our problems. You can't do that by not showing up. So we will show up. We've got to have fiscal stability in the state. You know, we've been living off of savings since 2012. 2012 was the last time it was a balanced budget. We can't continue to do that. We've gone through almost $18 billion of savings. That's astounding, absolutely astounding. We're almost out. We have got to have a fiscal plan. I'm not a big believer in looking back and said, well, I told you this, or should have done that. No, I only look forward. But we learn from our past. If you don't, you're doomed to repeat it. We need a fiscal plan that's realistic, that doesn't hurt Alaskans, that doesn't disproportionately hurt one segment or the other, certainly not the low income. You know, we need to do it surgically, not with a blunt instrument, but we need to do it together. We do it as Alaskans, working with the legislature, working with local government. We've talked about, you know, a sales tax impact local government because a lot of local governments, that's their bread and butter. We don't want to ignore that. So we've got to work together and have a fiscal plan that works for Alaska. We've got to do it right now.
Thank you, Candidate Walker. Candidate Gara, a year from now, where do you think we will be with COVID, and what will your response be?
Governor Walker and I are friends. I'd say, agree on a bunch of things and disagree on a bunch of things, but we agree on COVID. My wife goes to work every single day, and she sees what our mayor doesn't see. She sees what our governor doesn't see. She sees the reality that they talk about in pretend terms. When she sees people who are unvaccinated dying on their bed, she gets very disturbed when she hears our governor say, just urging people to get vaccinated would be like Nazi Germany, which is what he said. She gets disturbed when she hears our mayor say, healthcare professionals, they're going to have a price to pay for how they acted during this pandemic. Is that okay? You know, I believe in addressing COVID very similar to Governor Walker. You take leadership. This is what a governor should be doing. Our governor has issued 3 videos and done a press conference on COVID in the last 18 months from the comfort of his office. And he has sent mixed messages about it's your freedom not to get vaccinated. It is. But the consequences are you may die. I mean, you got to add the second part of the sentence. It's your freedom not to wear a mask when you're breathing on somebody right next to you that you don't know. That is your freedom. But the consequences is you may kill them. You need to say the second part. If I were governor, and when I'm governor, what I will do is I will travel the state, not sit in my office, and bring locally respected leaders and medical professionals, those who are locally respected, around the state every single day to communities so they can hear the truth. And if there were places that Governor Dunleavy's not popular, or Bill's not popular, or I'm not popular, we don't go. We just send the locally respected scientific and political leaders to convince people to do the only 2 things we know that will roll back this pandemic. In the lower 48, there are states where people are sitting in restaurants and going to museums and living normal life because they're doing those things. We need to get the word out so our people do those things so we get past this pandemic. There's a lot more to do, but scaring people out of a vaccination by using Nazi analogies, that is not the way to end this pandemic.
Thank you, Candidate Gara. Candidate Walker, a year from now, where do you think we will be with COVID, and what will your response be?
Well, it's my hope that a year from now, COVID is something in the past. That's my hope, anyway. But if it's not, I will issue a declaration of disaster. Absolutely, I will. You know, we had a opioid crisis when I was in office, and we issued a declaration of disaster. You know, a few other states did, and then the nation did. And we were invited to the White House for the signing of that because it was so historic that states were actually stepping up and issuing declaration of disaster when there was a disaster. When lives are lost in Alaska that are preventable, that's a disaster in my book. And that's why we did it, and that's why I will do it. We can't afford this partisan back and forth, well, is it a disaster, is it not? It's a disaster. You know, I was poked fun at as a result of last night. I spoke at a forum, and I talked a lot about issuing declaration of disaster, and Governor Dunleavy's communication people took issue of that and made fun of me for that. I'll take that every day because it's not about me. It's about those that are dying, those that are in trying to survive this virus. It absolutely comes back to leadership. I will issue the declaration of disaster. With that comes, certainly there's additional federal assistance comes with a declaration of disaster, but it acknowledges that it is a disaster. If we have people dying in Alaska and you're not issuing a disaster, it's like, well, it's not really a disaster. It is a disaster. I will issue that declaration. And I will work with the hospital association. My goodness, we will work with the hospital association. And we will listen to the healthcare experts, because that's what they are. They're healthcare experts. Somebody wrote an article recently and said we shouldn't be getting our healthcare advice from politicians and from athletes. Well, I mean, we're kind of politicians, but we're not going to tell you what's, you know, I'm listening to Kelly more than I'm listening to Representative Garrett, believe me, because it's the healthcare people on the front lines that we need to be listening to, the professionals and so we would approach it significantly different. We approach it similar to what we did in the opioid crisis, issue a declaration, and get your priorities straight and get this behind us.
Thank you, Candidate Walker. We will now go to our rapid fire questions. So we have our yes and no. If our candidates would hold up the yes and no placards. We will ask a series of questions. These are yes and no but, because there's always a caveat, especially in politics. There's probably never a straight up yes or no answer. So with that being said, if there's a question you have for one of the candidates about their yes and no's, please come talk to them afterwards. So with that, we will start with a warm-up question. Do you own a pair of extra tough boots?
I'll explain.
As I mentioned, please come talk to your candidates. Our second yes or no question. Should local government PERS rate be adjusted? All right, thank you. Question 3. Should the state of Alaska fund the mandated local property tax exemption value for senior citizens and disabled veterans as stated in AS 2945030G? All right, and I will say these are directly pulled from the priorities that AML has, resolutions and priority statements. Question 4, are you in support of fully funding the Community Assistance Program, formerly known as Revenue Sharing, at $90 million? All right, thank you. Are you in support of funding school debt bond reimbursement for debt that has been already acquired by communities, as it has been historically done? All right. Question 6, do you think the state of Alaska should adopt real property disclosure laws? All right. And our final question, do you support reforming the USDA Forest Service Secure Rules School program to increase sustainability? Okay, thank you, candidates, for our rapid fire questions. We have a few minutes left. We're going to go probably till the top of the hour unless Nils comes up here and drags me off. So I am going to deviate from our script. We're going to have to cut a few questions because these are just so riveting. But we'll do our best here. The next question that we have, we'll start with candidate Gara. It is important for a governor to have a strong relationship with local leaders. What is your plan to engage with communities and local leaders?
Okay, I don't have extra tufts because they hate my left toe. But I own 4 pairs of fishing waders and like 20 fishing rods and a raft and a canoe. So, look, I believe just as I did as a legislator, as local leaders came into my office, and I feel like my office, if those of you who came, I hope it was a welcome place. Sometimes it was a respite from legislators who gave people a hard time. I believe in listening. I believe in learning. I know that I do not know everything about everything in the world. And I think you're sort of an idiot if you think you do. So I will work with our local leaders, and a lot of that is going to involve listening. You know, there are times where our local leaders are going to go astray, and I won't try to embarrass them in public. You know, we've got a mayor who is telling people not to get vaccinated, but to use an animal injection. I would go to that mayor and try and work with him and try and get him the information that he needs. But if a local leader insists on jeopardizing the health of their community, I will have to, at some point, bring a public voice and public experts to correct that person if they're not willing to do that on their own. Because in terms of COVID, this is a matter of life and death. And if I have a mayor of half the population of the state, I will go to him and privately try to work with him and ask him not to hold an anti-vax conference and not to send a mixed message when people are dying in the hospital where my wife works. But if he will not do the right thing, I will have to bring experts to explain to people that the way out of this is 2 ways: vaccination and masking where appropriate indoors. You know, I will work with our local leaders to help solve the problem, which is the state has been dumping state school debt obligations, the state's failure to pay revenue sharing, they've been dumping those costs on local leaders. I will work with them for a solution so we can honor our statutory obligations to pay school bond debt, which I've always voted for, and so we could get back to community revenue sharing that hires police and lets communities operate. I've always voted for that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Gara. Candidate Walker, it is important for a governor to have a strong relationship with local leaders. What is your plan to engage with communities and local leaders?
It's critically important. You know, typically you look at a politician running for office, yes, I'll come and see you. I actually did that. You know, you've got to show up. You know, after I did the incredibly difficult, painful cuts I did, $1.6 billion in vetoes, I went out to local governments, and I went to the city council, went to the assembly, all over the state, and met with them publicly, and to answer and explain why I did what I had to do. You show up. My cabinet probably was the most local government intensive cabinet in the history of our state, starting with Nancy Peterson, Municipal Employee of the Year, my campaign manager. Couldn't have won without her. She said, I know nothing about politics. I said, Nancy, you've been in local government for a long time. You know a lot about politics, and she did. John Hosey, Deputy Chief of Staff, he was my local government liaison. If you want to get a hold of me and you couldn't get a hold of me, you got a hold of John. And he got 2 doors down from my office. His job title was local government liaison. Chris Laddick, phenomenal what he brought into the cabinet. Mike Navarre, Commissioner Navarre, Kenai Peninsula Borough, great addition to the cabinet. Shirley Marquardt, Commissioner of everything. She did everything. She did absolutely everything. Just phenomenal what Shirley did. Thank you, Shirley. Jim Whitaker, 2-term mayor of Fairbanks North Star Borough as Chief of Staff. Josie Benke, thank you, Josie, for coming in from Nome to be, Randy Hoffbeck came in from North Slope Borough. You know, some people in my cabinet kidded me whenever I was going to an AML event that I was going back to the hiring hall, that it kind of became known as the hiring hall of the Walker administration. And it kind of was, because you are doers. You get the job done. And it was telling when we had that much local government involvement in the state administration, we got a lot done. We really did. Very difficult hand that we had, $26 oil, $4 billion deficit. With all that, we got a lot done because we had a very significant presence of local government in our administration. So we will reach out to you. We will ask you to reach out to us as you did in the past. I look forward to traveling the state again once we are able to do that without all this, and being able to visit and hear and feel and understand each community's needs. So that's what you need. You need a governor that will show up.
All right, thank you, Candidate Walker. So we're going to probably go through one more question, and then we'll do a final closing statement. So our next question those were all the easy ones. Now we're getting into the hard ones. The hard question, I guess. We have time for one more. What is your approach to cut through the state budget and PFD gridlock and get back to governing the state of Alaska? Candidate Gara.
Thank you. I've done that as a legislator. You know, I was friends with Jay Hammond. In his later years, he'd come over to my house for coffee, and we'd talk. And Jay was a hero, as many of you know, many of you who knew him even better than I did. And he had a guiding principle, which was, first, you get a fair share for your oil. We're not. Conoco is the only oil company that releases their Alaska profits. The other companies refuse. Conoco has made $6 billion more in Alaska over the last 6 years than they made in all of the lower 48 states combined because of our generous, insane subsidies and tax credits. We give away our oil when other states get a fair share for their oil. Jay said, if oil doesn't address your fiscal problems, then you go down the line. He would say an income tax, and then he would say, only then do you look at the permanent fund. Jay's sense of fairness was right, which is the wealthiest, those with the greatest means should chip in first. You don't ask a foster kid to chip in first because this governor has torn apart our agency in charge of helping foster youth. We have more homeless foster youth, anecdotally, but I've seen it at Covenant House, more homeless foster youth than we've ever had today. You don't do that. So part of the solution has to be a fair share for our oil. We become equal partners with our oil industry, not junior partners. And then you don't end up in this situation where you have to choose between schools or a university or job training or respecting our elders or giving children an opportunity in life or construction jobs. That's the governor's plan, or. But if we stood up to the oil industry and got a fair share for oil, we'd be able to pay a bigger dividend than this governor has ever paid. We'd be able to erase the $120 million we're behind inflation with our public schools and provide a better public education. We wouldn't have to decimate a university that's also the biggest voc ed provider in the state. We could provide job training around the state. We could build renewable energy around the state. We could do construction around the state in rural and urban communities. We could maintain our ports just by closing those subsidies, just by closing those loopholes. And we all have a different view on a fiscal plan. That's been the problem. But you have to do what the public also says, and the public is most behind doing that first, right? It's harder to shove things at the public than it is to do what the public wants, and the public is right about this one. We should get a fair share for our oil. Jay Hammond would say that if he was standing here right now. We should get a fair share for our oil. Wally Hickel would say that. My first oil tax reform bill, when I was a junior rookie legislator, I couldn't find anybody to support me. Jay Hammond and Wally Hickel did. And they did a press release with me and said we should get a fair share for our oil. It was true then. It's true today. It's one of the ways out of this fiscal mess. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Gara. Candidate Walker, what is your approach to cutting through the state budget, and PFD gridlock and get back to governing the state of Alaska?
You know, shortly after coming into office, when the oil plummeted to $26, we put together a conference of Alaskans at UAF. We stayed in the dorms, and for 3 days we talked about the situation that we were in. One of our team leaders went up to the podium and said, we as Alaskans have lived for 30, 40 years eating off a menu with no prices. Now we need to decide what we want to eat and how we're going to pay for it. And that's really where we are. I'm tired of cutting. I did more cutting than any governor, probably all governors combined, quite honestly, and it was absolutely horrific. I don't want to ever do that again. I don't want any governor ever to have to do that again. It's about what kind of Alaska do we want? Okay, let's figure that out. What are we going to prioritize? You know, a budget is really a statement of your values. So what kind of an Alaskan do we want? We want one that kids will stay, good education, teachers will stay, you know, or do we want to have one that's just absolute bare bones and just on a harvest mentality, take what you can get and then leave Alaska? I don't want that kind of Alaska. Let's figure that out, and let's figure out how we're going to pay for it. You know, when we took a $4 billion deficit down to $1 billion deficit, we did not do that on our own. We did that by working with the legislature every day. All 4 caucuses met in my cabinet room once a week to be able to get their input, to get their buy-in, and it was a bipartisan effort that did that. We will continue to do that. I really want us to grow the permanent fund to $100 billion. We get to $100 billion, we take off 4%, there's our budget. I mean, people that talk about the really high dividends, I wish we could give out a $10,000 dividend. Don't anybody quote me on that. I didn't really mean to say it that way, but we can't. But we can't without imposing horrific taxes on everybody. So what are we going to do? We need to find that balance. We need to have a dividend that's sustainable, that's predictable, that people can plan on, and it doesn't take up 90% of the time in Juneau for the legislators. They need to get on to governing Alaska like they want to do. So we need to look at the formula, a formula that's 42 years old, maybe needs to be looked at, have a different formula, something that's predictable, but something that allows us to get that $100 billion. We get to 100, but we were at 81 a while back. It's gone down a little bit. The 14th largest permanent fund, sovereign wealth fund in the world. It was on a per capita basis, probably in the top 3 or 4. You know, we fight about what we don't have. We don't acknowledge what we do have. What the incredible resources I mean, there are 3 sovereign wealth funds in the nation. Alaska is the top with about 80 billion. Then Texas has one in about 45. They started theirs in 1875, something in that range for education. And North Dakota has one of $6 or $8 billion. So here we are, the largest sovereign wealth fund with the smallest population. We have tremendous opportunities in that regard. So it's a matter of looking at all the pieces that we do have, and how do we bring some predictability and some peace into this issue, And when you stand up and wave around a $6,700 bad check, like the guy who didn't show up today, people get the expectation that you can afford $6,700. That check bounced. The governor does not have a checkbook. The legislature has a checkbook. Representative Gara knows that well. The governor doesn't. So the governor can't stand up and wave a check around because you don't have a checkbook. So we won't be doing that either.
Thank you, Candidate Walker. We will close out with a 2-minute final closing, and so each candidate will have 2 minutes to address the crowd. Candidate Gara, you're first.
Thank you. We skipped a couple of questions, so I'm going to answer some of those. You've heard what I stand for. You've heard my values. I wish Governor Dunleavy was here because he could tell you why he tried to raid our PCE fund. And the answer is he refuses to adopt a fiscal plan and stand up to the oil industry. So in 2019, he tried to steal that $1 billion out of our PCE fund. And in 2021, he tried to steal that $1 billion out of our PCE fund. And if he were here, I would ask him to defend that. And he tried to do it until a court told him he couldn't in 2021. He said he was just testing the law twice, in 2019 and 2021, because he won't raise the money we need to run the society, so he's been trying to empty our accounts. He's emptied our savings as a senator and as a governor. He tried to empty your PCE fund that grants you fairness in rural Alaska, and people in rural Alaska deserve fairness. And then he tried to take an extra $3 billion out of the permanent fund. He said he'd only do it once. Governor Walker is right. We should grow the permanent fund so we can provide for the next generation, not steal from the next generation. So I would ask Governor Dunleavy to explain his extra. The $3 billion he proposed would have been the biggest raid in permanent fund history, the biggest permanent fund raid in Alaska history. That's what that would have been. That is neglect. That is not leadership. I will say that whether he was here or whether he was not here. Trying to raid the PCE fund is neglect, not leadership. I would say that if he were here or he were not here. Look, I believe in a brighter future, a future that gives children opportunity so they can have a job in the state and be trained for a job in the state, and treat seniors with dignity that does not take away their senior benefits payments. This governor talks about honoring statutes. Here are a couple statutes he didn't honor. He tried to cut $250 million out of our public education. That's a statute that required those funds to be provided. He violated that his first day in office. And then he tried to violate our PCE statute by trying to empty that fund. And then he's violated the law that says we have to pay local school bond debt. I will honor you. I will honor you so we have a future, and I will make sure that we have an Alaska we can believe in again. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Gara. Candidate Walker, closing remarks.
Well, thank you for allowing us to be here today. Thank you, Representative Gara, for showing up. I'd be surprised if you didn't, because you're a show-up kind of guy, and I appreciate that. We have Alaska, you know, we are a history of opportunities when out of something that's terrible. Out of World War II, we ended up with the Alcan Highway, changed our state. Out of the energy crisis, we ended up with an oil pipeline. So now the infrastructure bill comes along. I know you heard from Senator Murkowski earlier today, and maybe we'll again tomorrow, I understand. This is a very significant opportunity for Alaska. Probably the biggest opportunity fiscally since the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline was built. Some of it is designated for Alaska. I love the project on rural Alaska. I love the infrastructure project for rural Alaska. So tired of people that are saying, well, we can't afford rural Alaska. All of our revenue comes from rural Alaska. It all comes from so we cannot turn our back on rural Alaska. So I'm so pleased about that. Some of the money will be through formulas. The highway funding is an example. Some will take a while for it to come out, but some of it is going to be on a competitive basis. We have to compete with other states. And as I always told my fellow governors at various conferences, if I have to compete with you on a rural basis, I'll beat you every day. There's no question about it. And that's what we need to be doing, because a lot of it is designated for rural areas. But we need to have an administration that's going to fight for that money. We need to have an administration that's willing to work collaboratively to bring as much of that money back as possible. God bless Lisa Murkowski. Thank you very much, Dan Sullivan, for your vote on that and your help, and Congressman Young. He gets beat up now because he voted for it. He's a true Alaskan, so our delegation did a great job on that. I appreciate it. Now it's up to us as an administration to go after that money aggressively as much as we can get. Alaska is one of 4 states in the nation. We got over $3,500 per person in that bill for Alaskans. It's very significant, but it can be even more if we go aggressively after that and get that money. You need an administration that's not afraid of partisan, oh, we can't go talk to them because they're a different party than we are. I spent as much time with President Obama as I did with President Trump. I didn't care. It wasn't about me. It was about Alaska. And that's what we need, is an administration that cares about Alaska and not carried about partisan politics, the next election, the political career. No, we need to care about Alaska. Alaska first. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Candidate Walker. Let's put a big round of applause together for both of our candidates. Thank you.